Tonight on Primetime, pressure mounting on British Prime Minister Keir Starmer as more than 80 MPs and some of his own ministers now openly call for his resignation. Starmer on the ropes and fighting for political survival. Good evening. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is under mounting pressure from within his own Labour Party, but insists he remains focused on governing as calls grow for him to step aside. With divisions deepening at Westminster ahead of the King's speech, questions are now intensifying over how long Starmer can hold on to power. Our correspondent Ollie Barrett has the details.
Keir Starmer insists that he is fighting on, and he has told his cabinet that they need to be getting on with the job of governing. Indeed, on Wednesday here at Westminster, we're due to see the King's speech, which should be the government setting out its legislative agenda for the new parliamentary session. And Keir Starmer hopes and believes that he will still be Prime Minister and will not have had to set out a timetable for his departure before that speech is delivered here at Westminster by King Charles. But it is a very difficult spot that the Prime Minister finds himself in. Dozens of Labour MPs in his own party have now called on him to set out a timetable for his departure. There have been some ministerial resignations as well, and so the pressure continues to build. But Keir Starmer says at this point there still hasn't been anyone formally triggering a leadership challenge against him, and so he says he's going to be getting on with the job and showing to the electorate that he's delivering on the manifesto that won the Labour Party the last general election. But after some disastrous election results in different parts of the country last week, after a series of missteps and controversies from Keir Starmer's government, the pressure very much remains on him, and many in his own party are convinced that he is no longer up to the job and they want to see a new leader in place instead. But the Labour Party hugely divided about who that leader should be and exactly how and when they should move to that point. The opposition parties say that this is a party that is in chaos, that is leaving the country in chaos. We have seen government borrowing costs spiking on Tuesday as a result of the instability. Keir Starmer wants to show that he is getting on with the job, but it may well not be up to him in the hours, days, if not weeks ahead. Ollie Barrett at Westminster for A News.
Britain's political landscape then appears increasingly unstable, and the pressure on Keir Starmer is no longer coming only from the opposition. Well, joining us now to unpack what's happening inside Labour is Philip Churn, political commentator from Scotland in the UK today. Phil, great to have you with us as always. First question, is this survivable, do you think, for Keir Starmer?
Is it survivable for Keir Starmer? The answer is probably almost certainly no. Is it survivable for Labour? Maybe, but probably only if Keir Starmer is seen to do what an increasing number of people within the party believe is the right thing, and that's to move over and allow somebody else in. So no, he is in a very, very precarious position. But he's been in a precarious position almost from the moment he started.
Yes.
The hype was very much in the first days about this glorious victory, this wonderful way in which people had voted for Labour, and that's what they were relishing in. But if you actually look at the figures, the voting figures, that wasn't entirely true. In fact, Labour had, in the previous three general elections, their vote, the actual number of people voting for them, had gone down gradually. It was only because of the catastrophic result of the Conservatives in what then could have been seen as being a two-party system that allowed Labour to win so successfully. So what emerges from that is this situation whereby the two-party system becomes very much in question. And that is one of the reasons why there's been a bit of emergence of other parties to both the left and the right.
Phil, if you look at the leading candidates, the other leading candidates that people are putting forward as likely successors, Wes Streeting hasn't yet made a move. Andy Burnham at the moment can't make a move. How close are we in reality to a leadership challenge, do you think?
I think we're close to a leadership challenge, but whether that will be an effective leader that will in any way change the style and indeed the PR of the party remains very, very much in question because, as you say, Wes Streeting would always like, even though he hasn't gone public right now, it's kind of known that he is interested in that particular position. Andy Burnham would probably be the public's favourite in terms of current Labour voters and will bring a number of people back to Labour. But the process of getting him there would be quite long because he has to be voted as an MP first, and then he has to get past the NEC and various other things like that. So there is a process. So right now, any of the various people that might be considered to be possible candidates, there's a small handful of them, they're sort of continuity candidates. They're people who would be seen to be pretty much carrying on with a few slight tweaks the same sort of policies as Keir Starmer has done, but perhaps initially with a bit more dynamism, but they're essentially coming from the same camp. So it's very difficult to see a new effective leader in the short term.
And Phil, how much damage did these disastrous local election results do you think, to Starmer's authority inside the party? Was this just the tipping point, or were there other factors at play as well?
People were bracing themselves for this. So people within the party were kind of running towards the edge of the cliff, but hoping the parachute would open, and it didn't. So as a result of that, it was bad, and it was worse than was expected. Add to that, I mean, I'm currently here in Scotland at the moment. Some of the devolved nations, like Scotland, like Wales, they in some ways rubber-stamped the idea of how badly Labour was doing, and in some ways triggered the feeling of Keir Starmer is failing. And part of the reason for that is that some within the party had hoped that groups like Reform, that the Reform Party on the right was very much an English factor, and so people would continue to support Labour in places like Wales and Scotland, but it didn't happen. So, and even though Reform didn't pick up in those various areas, there was very much a case of saying, we're not voting for Starmer, and that happened across the nation. So almost all of the perspectives, the gambles that the Labour Party had taken in order to be able to try and stay afloat had failed. And at that particular point, that's the point at which they have to do some very deep thinking. And add to that, there is the Labour Party as a whole, even if their policies have been seen to be effective by the population, which they haven't over this particular time, there is the additional factor of the Labour Party itself has been discredited over the last few months with people like Mandelson and Morgan McSweeney and people, and so the whole engine, the whole, if you like, the philosophy base, the people who built the style of Labour that we have now, have also been discredited, and therefore much of the party goes with that.
Many people, Phil, are pointing to this idea that party politics has kind of moved on, in a sense. You look at, as you said, Reform UK, Nigel Farage continuing to gain momentum on the right. The Greens have garnered a lot of support on the left. These new parties, how prepared is Labour to take on this sort of new style of politics?
I don't think it's prepared at all, because I won't even say just Labour Party. I think this is where the whole traditional two-party system comes into question. The two-party system which has existed in the UK for the best part of 100 years, and that two-party system has been the traditional Conservative Party and the traditional Labour Party, and pretty much the power base has flipped between those two for almost 100 years. And what happens in a situation like this is that they have both those parties have taken so much of the centre ground, which is a philosophy based in a sort of economics that's around 40 years old, and people have begun to realise that's not working. And it's one of the reasons why the Conservative Party began to find it was unable to implement the policies that it's wanted. But the Labour wanted to come into power, wanting to pursue policies which weren't radical enough for the British public and were therefore seen as being carrying on the same sort of ideology. So what are people going to do? They've become tired of the mid-ground. So what they're going to do is to start to look elsewhere. And that's really what they've done. On the right, people have begun to look to reform. On the left, they've begun to look towards towards the Greens, for example. There's a sort of five-party system now, and it's spread across all of the country. And if you look at the results from only last week, you'll see that the only two parties that were doing badly in all of that were Conservative and Labour, the traditional ones. And so you can see just how much that centre ground has been suppressed and pushed out towards the sides.
Finally, Phil, just a couple of years left now until the general election, not a huge amount of time. Starmer insists at the moment he's staying, but surely there's no realistic path for him to regain control of the party, is there?
No. I think realistically there isn't, because there's too much animosity and the divisions are great. The factions have been growing for a little while, but they're so out in the open now with some of the key leading figures. I don't think that the party will allow him to stay. Now, whether it would be unprecedented if they actually forced him out rather than trying to have a sort of planned leadership race.
Yes.
But either way, that is one way or another. He isn't going to make it until the end, because if he did, it would be suicide for the party. The party would not be able to survive that, and they wouldn't forgive him for it. And it needs in many ways a radical change. And the argument is that in the same way that the Conservative Party is now looking towards shifting slightly more towards the right in order to be able to bring in some of their votes. The Labour Party is probably going to have to shift to the left if it wants to pick up some of the votes that it's lost and become a little bit more populist on that front. Will Keir Starmer make the next general election? No, he won't. He won't be Prime Minister by then. I can say that with reasonable confidence. But might Labour? Difficult job at hand, but not impossible.
How much time do you need, Phil, to prepare, to get a country used to a leader, and then to try and win a general election? I mean, presumably the people behind the scenes will be thinking they need to move pretty quickly, next few weeks, next few months.
Yeah, what they need to do it's a balance, isn't it, between wanting to try and appease a very disenchanted general public, the general electorate at the moment, on the one hand, but also trying to ensure the stability of the party. And one of the things that the Conservatives were criticised about was how frequently the party leaders changed over a period of time, and if and they want to be. The Labour wants to be seen as being different. It wants to be seen as being more measured and more planned than that. How long will it take? I mean, it's how long is a piece of string, and it depends on external factors like what's going on in the world as well as just in the UK. But what you do need is to rebuild that confidence and build that sense of hope within the public, and it's an uphill struggle. But you could do it by changing to a leader that is seen to be more popular, and to introduce a set of perhaps more radical policies. And those are the kind of things that would potentially win people over. Within then, you could do it in 18 months to 2 years. if there weren't too many external factors, knocking it down.
Phil, always great to get your analysis, and we appreciate you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay.
European Union defence ministers gathered in Brussels on Tuesday for the Foreign Affairs Council defence meeting. Now, the talks are chaired by the bloc's foreign policy chief, Keir, and will focus on strengthening Europe's security and more. EU ministers are discussing continued support for Ukraine as Brussels considers how to use a proposed 90 billion EU loan package to meet Kyiv's urgent military needs. Now, the Middle East is also high on the meeting's agenda, particularly the situation in Lebanon, where European officials are exploring the possibility of a new mission to support the Lebanese armed forces. European governments are also pushing manufacturers to increase arms production in timely manners.
We have the defense minister of Ukraine joining us, and of course there also the question how we can use the 90 billion loan and how does that all proceed so that it would answer to the urgent needs of Ukraine. And then we have a discussion of the defense industry and also together with the industry actually, because we see the problem that the defense ministers are pushing. The countries have a lot of funding on the table, but the defense industry is not ramping up their production. We discuss also Middle East, and Middle East specifically with the defense ministers, two topics. One is Lebanon. As we know, UNIFIL is ending by this year, and there is a willingness of the Europeans to put together another mission to actually help the Lebanese armed forces, and of course we are already helping them.
Well, Europe's defence priorities are rapidly expanding from Ukraine to the Middle East and from military aid to industrial readiness. Well, joining us now to unpack the key discussions taking place in Brussels is Mila Demetras, political analyst. He's joining us from Ankara in Turkey. Mila, very good indeed to have you with us as always. Thank you for joining us. Just give us a sense of the key priorities emerging from today's EU defence ministers meeting.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Sean, and thank you very much again for having me. Yes, this is the, I think, key moments for European Union. I think the leaders, and especially these defense ministers, and of course bureaucrats like Ms. Kaja Kallas, I think they are really having some hard days, especially with the second term of Mr. Trump. It is not secret anymore. We already know that EU, and especially the defense sector and defense, especially responsible personalities, are really having some important days, key days. And I think they discussed also these critical moments, I think, today also in Brussels. One important topic is, of course, for a while, it's always been Ukraine. The defense sector, of course, the support to the defense capability to Ukraine is the number one issue of European Union, maybe responsible personalities. But I think the key, of course, country still stands as Russia. Because Russia, as we last seen in this the 9th May Victory Day, maybe parade, the Victory Day events, has also another strange days, because we do not know still what Mr. Putin's next moves will be in Ukraine, in the other maybe regions of Europe. So maybe Europe also and European Union wants to show its maybe willingness that it wants to create a zone of defense, a zone of maybe defense capabilities. Also in this meeting, I think this, after Ukraine, second topic is how to speed up these defense capabilities, especially with much more arms production, especially this new generation of arms, which are, first of all, I think drones, I think that are seen so cheap, quote unquote, technologies, but it started really to shape all the war zones. Think about Middle East, think about, of course, Europe, Caucasia. I think drones and this new style of generation of military equipments start to be so important. I think Europe wants to have this motivation, first of all, and it wants to maybe show to its companies, maybe to this private sector, that a new age is coming, and this new age of uncertainty is also pushes Europe to think much more, I think, strategically.
Yes, and finance, of course, critical to this new age, as you put it. And how important is this proposed 90 billion EU package for Ukraine at this moment?
It's a huge money, Mr. Sean. It is an important sum of money for a country like Ukraine. But if you think, of course, a country like Russia, with all the capabilities from, of course, the legacy of Soviet Union, from the legacy, of course, all these technologies and new technology of Russia, we do not know still how Russia and Mr. Putin go far in this next moves, in these next steps, as we all know that in this 3-day ceasefire is now, of course, ended because of this Victory Day, as I said, in this 9th May celebrations. But still, of course, Ukrainian also sector of defense needs this. 90 billion means much more air defense systems, much more ammunition, and of course, drones and new technologies. But we are not sure still, from the perspective of Turkey, for example, like an actor of Turkey, who is also capable, as we all know, of this defense and military technologies. We do not know still how can it maybe make a balance with Russia and Ukraine, and how can affect its long-term stability of Europe and European countries, first of all, the region of Baltics, Eastern Europe, vis-a-vis Russia. To spend more to such military technologies could be an answer. It is still a big question mark, I think, especially in this time of world politics.
Indeed. European officials seem openly frustrated with slow weapons production. How serious is that challenge, do you think?
Europe is the liberal continent. We all know that the economy, also politics and everything is about discussion, is everything about for democratic choices and democratic maybe thinking. But as we all know that the world's, I think, start to be shaped with some anti-democratic measures. We all accept, I think, from America to Russia to China, even to all regions. I mean, in a continent like Europe, to think with some, unanimous, with democratic votes, can really make some actor much more slower. And I think some companies still in Europe, they do not want to spend maybe in such a time, of course, of digital era. Maybe they want to spend to youth, they want to spend some banking, finance and other sectors, artificial intelligence, and to spend more to these defense technologies. I think still they have important stations. I think Ms. Kaja Kallas makes an important and bold statement, I think, after today's meeting, that they want their companies, I think, in this stage, but we do not know still, especially in a continent, as I said, in a liberal continent like Europe, how can persuade, how can make a real statement and real maybe motivation to their companies, we will see.
And Lebanon, of course, extremely important. What are we learning? What signals are we getting about possible future European involvement in Lebanon?
Yes, this is another important and very key topic, I think, in today's, defense minister meeting, this issue of Middle East, I think. Yes, Lebanon is a key region also to some countries. First of all, France, we all know that. Mr. Macron especially is so sensitive about the attacks of Israel, the unilateral attacks of Israel, of course, after Palestine. We all know that these devastative attacks, these very harsh attacks now directed from Israel to Lebanon. And I think Europe wants to show its willingness that they are also a humanitarian continent. They are also a humanitarian actor, and they want to show maybe Israel, the actors like Israel, I think they want to maybe put this actor like in a equal position with Russia. And in this next step, I think after United Nations missions, we will see Europe much more active in this region. But still, again, some question marks will happen, because in Europe, we also know that there are other actors who are really thinking much more positively, especially when the issues about Israel. And we all see that how Europe can be shaped much more strategically and much more humanitarian way, especially in such sensitive issues like the Israeli case, Lebanon, especially in Iranian case also.
Yeah, very interesting point you make there. Europe much more active, but where do you think they're going? Are they moving towards a more coordinated, a more independent defence posture overall, do you think?
I think yes, the independence, they now understand how can be a real important principle, especially after all these years. Protection. as I said, the 9th May and 8th May they are very symbolic dates for Europe after all this devastation of Second World War. And they all seen that they are really having some insufficiencies, especially in their communities also, in their defense sector also. And after the loss of Britain also with Brexit, we can say that another important pillar of this common defense and security policy is also damaged, with this Brexit problem. What we can see, like Germany, like France, like Spain, even they have very, very different opinions about some important, complicated problems, as I said, like about Israel. They also understand that this independence is an issue. This is the issue of the coming ages of Europe, especially when we think that Mr. Trump will be in days, in China, and Mr. Putin will not stop, I think, for thinking much more, in a very traditional way of Russian diplomacy. So they will also think, I think, much more independently, as you said, in this coming decades. And we hope that they will not skip also the actors like Turkey, Azerbaijan in this very wide region of Eurasia.
Mr. Demetras, always great to get your analysis. We appreciate your time very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
OK, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories shaping the day with Andy Mioch. Don't go away.
Figura Armenia que Argentina. Y empieza por plata y después los gobiernos. Un tipo muy piola.
No, money from Armenia, from Russia. Group of Russian Armenians.
People who are financial days.
Some rich Armenians, they live in Russia.
Pashinyan lo puso preso. Pashinyan is not protecting Nagorno-Karabakh.
The Armenian game is Russia.
No con Pashinyan mismo, pero...
Que remuevan a Pashinyan.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Now let's get the latest business news with Andy Mioch, who is here. Andy, what have you got on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, oil has extended gains, eBay has rejected a takeover bid, Netflix and Meta are facing some legal challenges, and a snack giant is rebranding due to the Iran war. So let's have a look. First up, oil prices rose as U.S. President Donald Trump said that the ceasefire with Iran was on life support after rejecting Tehran's counter-proposal to end the war, signaling the conflict in the Middle East could drag on.
Brent crude futures climbed above $107 per barrel on Tuesday, extending gains from the previous session. It comes as US President Donald Trump said the US-Iran ceasefire was on massive life support after dismissing Tehran's latest peace proposal, fueling concerns that the Strait of Hormuz may stay effectively closed for an extended period. Iran reportedly called for the US to end its naval blockade and ease sanctions while seeking to retain some authority over traffic through the key shipping route. Meanwhile, reports suggested Trump is set to meet with his national security team to weigh a potential return to military operations, alongside renewed discussions about escorting commercial vessels through Hormuz. Saudi Aramco CEO warned that the market is losing roughly 100 million barrels of supply each week, adding that prolonged disruptions could push any market normalization into next year.
Online seller eBay is rejecting an unsolicited $56 billion takeover offer from GameStop, calling the proposal neither credible nor attractive. GameStop said earlier this month that it was pursuing a takeover of eBay, seeing it as a vehicle to compete with online retail giant Amazon.
eBay on Tuesday rejected GameStop's $56 billion takeover proposal, calling the unsolicited bid neither credible nor attractive. GameStop CEO Ryan Cohen last week unveiled an audacious bid for eBay, offering to acquire the online marketplace for $125 per share in a cash and stock deal. eBay is much larger than the video game retailer, with a market cap of just over $48 billion, while GameStop's is roughly $10.3 billion. Chairman of eBay's board wrote in a letter that the proposal was rejected following a thorough review. eBay listed several concerns with GameStop's offer, including uncertainty regarding the financing proposal, along with operational risks and the debt load that would result from the proposed transaction.
Netflix has been sued in Texas over claims it collects data belonging to children and adults in the U.S. state without their consent and uses addictive design to keep them hooked. As Texas Attorney General accused the streaming giant of spying on citizens, Netflix rejected the claims, saying it will challenge them in court.
Netflix was sued Monday by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton for allegedly collecting data on children and other consumers without consent and designing its platform to be addictive. Texas said that for years the streaming giant has falsely represented to consumers that it did not collect or share user data, but it said the company actually tracked and sold viewers' habits and preferences, making billions of dollars a year. Netflix was also accused of quietly using dark patterns to keep users watching, including an autoplay feature. The complaint said that the firm's endgame is to get children and families glued to the screen, harvest their data while they are stuck there, and then monetize the data for a handsome profit. Paxton wants the company to purge data it collected illegally, not use the data for targeted advertising without users' consent, and pay civil fines of up to $10,000 per violation. A Netflix spokesperson said the lawsuit lacks merit and is based on inaccurate and distorted information, adding the company complies with privacy and data protection laws everywhere it operates.
Meta lost an important legal fight in Europe after EU's top court sided with Italian regulators in a dispute over compensating publishers for the online use of news content. At the center of the case was Meta's challenge against Italy's communications regulator, which pushed for a system requiring online platforms to fairly compensate publishers when using portions of their news articles.
Meta Platforms on Tuesday lost its fight against an Italian regulatory order that it should compensate publishers for using snippets of their news articles after Europe's top court sided with the Italian telecoms watchdog. The case underscores the ongoing copyright battle between publishers and creators and tech companies over the use of newspaper articles or authors' work for AI training that have triggered litigation against companies including Meta, OpenAI, and Anthropic for infringement. The case came before the Luxembourg-based Court of Justice of the European Union after Meta challenged the Italian Communications Authority's power to set the compensation that online platforms should pay for using press articles. Meta argued that such national measures are incompatible with rights already granted to publishers under EU copyright legislation. The European Publishers Council said the court ruling was good for the journalism and news industries.
In self-driving cars news, Waymo is recalling hundreds of robo-taxis to fix a software issue that could cause the autonomous vehicles to drive on flooded roads. The recall affects nearly 3,800 vehicles equipped with the company's 5th and 6th generation automated driving systems.
Waymo said on Tuesday it is recalling about 3,800 robo-taxis in the United States after identifying a risk that vehicles could enter flooded roads with higher speed limits, raising safety concerns. The Alphabet unit said the recall followed an incident in April in which a Waymo vehicle drove into a flooded lane in San Antonio during extreme weather. Waymo said the vehicle was unoccupied and there were no injuries, but the incident prompted the company to review similar scenarios involving high speeds and impassable flooded roads. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration said Waymo has temporarily narrowed its operating scope to increase weather-related restrictions and updated its maps while it works on a permanent remedy.
And finally, Japan's biggest snack maker has been forced to use black and white packaging for some flagship products because of ink ingredient shortages caused by the Strait of Hormuz blockade. Calbee, whose potato chip brands are known for brightly colored bag designs, said 14 of its products would switch to monochrome branding by the end of May.
Japan's top maker of snacks has landed on a creative solution to conserve oil-derived input materials. It will switch its brightly coloured packaging to black and white. In an eye-catching move, Tokyo-based Calbee on Tuesday said it would temporarily use only 2 ink colours on 14 of its products, including its potato chips, Kappa Epperson snacks and the Frugra breakfast cereal. Products with the revised packaging will hit store shelves from May 25th, it said. Calbee, which has the largest share of the domestic snacks market, said the initiative was aimed at maintaining stable shipments in response to the unstable supply affecting certain raw materials due to the US-Israeli war on Iran. Japanese companies have lately sought to minimize the impact of rising costs and input material shortages, even as the government seeks to reassure the public and businesses oversupplies. Printing ink requires naphtha, an oil derivative for which Japan relies on imports from the Middle East for about 40% of its consumption.
Well, that's all in the business brief for tonight. And I get back to you, Guy.
Very interesting indeed. Andy, as always, thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, A News investigates growing questions surrounding French military-linked flights to Armenia and what may have moved behind the scenes of recent diplomacy. Don't go away.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Figura Armenia que Argentina. Empieza por plata y es para los gobiernos. Un tipo muy piola.
No, money from Armenia from Russia. Group of Russian Armenians. People who are financial based, some rich Armenians, they live in Russia.
Pashinyan lo puso. Pashinyan is not protecting neocontroller.
The Armenian game is Russia.
No con Pashinyan mismo, pero
que remuevan a Pashinyan.
Welcome out, you're watching Primetime. And now A News brings you an exclusive investigation into growing questions surrounding French military-linked flights to Armenia. Well, flight tracking records show movements by French Air and Space Force aircraft following President Emmanuel Macron's visit to Yerevan, raising questions over whether diplomacy was accompanied by a wider defence logistics operation. Now, the records do not prove what was transported, but with French-made Caesar howitzers now appearing in Armenia ahead of Republic Day celebrations, scrutiny is growing over cargo declarations, transit permissions, and possible military deliveries. Here's the story. What is France really doing in Armenia? French reporting gives the official frame. According to Le Figaro, President Emmanuel Macron's visit to Yerevan centered on a strategic partnership with Armenia. Defense cooperation was already part of that picture, with Armenia's 2024 order of 36 French-made Caesar howitzers. But the questions now go further. They ask whether the public partnership was moving alongside a deeper military track. Macron arrived in Armenia in early May. His formal state visit began on May 5th. Then come the aircraft records. ADSB material shows an Airbus A330-200 of the French Air and Space Force flying toward Yerevan on May 4th. The next day, it left Yerevan for Paris. Hours later, the aircraft flew from Paris to Istres-le-Tubet, a French military airbase. This proves movement, not cargo, but it raises the logistics question. Was this only official transport or part of a wider military support chain? The same aircraft appears earlier in separate tracking material, moving east from Europe on March 28th, then appearing around the South Korea-Japan area between March 29th and April 3rd. That timing matters. In Japan, French and Japanese defense ministers signed the Japan-France Defense Roadmap on April 1st. In South Korea, Macron and President Lee Jae-myung agreed on April 3rd to deepen cooperation, including in defense and energy. Again, this proves movement, not cargo, but it places the aircraft inside a wider pattern of defense-linked diplomacy. Then came the A400M file. A tracking image from May 11th shows a French military A400M moving eastward toward the South Caucasus. According to the claim being examined, cargo linked to this route was declared to Georgia as gas cylinders, lithium batteries, and chemical substances. But the question is whether the actual cargo was different, possibly Caesar-related components, assemblies, or support equipment. That question became sharper after Caesar howitzers appeared in footage from Yerevan ahead of Armenia's May 28th Republic Day parade. So the issue is not only Macron's visit, it is what moved around it. What was declared to Georgia? What permission was granted? And did the cargo match the legal status of the flight? Under the 1944 Chicago Convention, civilian and military aircraft operate under different legal regimes. So if military cargo was moved under a misleading declaration, it would raise questions about airspace permission, transit approval, and the integrity of civil aviation rules. The public record shows partnership. The flight records show movement. The footage shows Caesar systems in Armenia, and the cargo claim still needs verification. Until the A400M manifest, Georgia's transit permission, ICAO compliance records, and independent confirmation are clear, the case remains open, not proven, but serious enough to demand answers.
En effet, en quelque sorte, de la majorité géopolitique de sortir de cette entrave et de se tourner vers l'Europe. On ne peut pas faire comme si ça n'existait pas, nous, Français. On doit embrasser ce choix et l'engager.
Okay, flight records, military aircraft movements, and French-made Caesar systems appearing in Armenia, all now raising serious questions about what may have accompanied President Macron's recent visit to Yerevan. Well, our very own Anastasia Lavrina has been closely following the investigation. Anastasia, good to have you with us in the studio. Let's just go back to the start then. What exactly triggered these new questions around the French flights to Armenia?
Well, Guy, that's indeed what we have seen right now. This material, it's a very brilliant, I would say, an exclusive flight tracking material obtained by A News raised many questions about the real aim, the recent visit Emmanuel Macron had to Yerevan. Armenia, the plans, Armenia's long-term plans of Armenia in Armenia and the South Caucasus, and the exclusive materials which were taken and then demonstrated to the viewers also raised the questions about the cargo, potential cargo delivered from France to Armenia. Let's just follow what it was stated in the video. The French military aircraft traveled from Paris to Yerevan on May 4. Then on May 5th, the official President Macron visit to Armenia started. And the same day, the French military aircraft traveled back from Yerevan to Paris. But after just some hours, it traveled to the French military base. So the question is, was it just a protocol that the same military aircraft had to follow the visit of President Macron to Yerevan, Armenia, or there was some military delivered from France to Armenia? We do remember that in October 2023, France officially declared that it has an intention to intensify the military cooperation, defense cooperation with Armenia. Then within this visit of President Macron to Armenia, the strategic partnership agreement was signed, and we cannot ignore the fact that the big space of that agreement devoted to the military cooperation. And from the shootings, which was also aired, we can see that some Caesars, these are artillery systems, were already delivered to Armenia, and it's supposed to be demonstrated on May 28. So what we also have to do is to follow how French media is presenting the results of that visit of President Macron to Armenia. Not all of them are speaking only about EPC summit, which was initiated and supported by President Macron in 2022, and it's now still being followed by President and his personal attendance and attitude. So what is also being promoted widely in French media is that intensification of the military cooperation between two countries possibly have two aims. The first is to diminish the presence of Russia and in Armenia and Armenian military dependence on Russia. And the second, I don't know why, but we can guess, they also present Azerbaijan and the necessity to protect Armenia from Azerbaijan. That's a very interesting moment because now two countries are speaking about peace deal.
Yes.
And indeed 9 months without war. And President Macron himself mentioned that this is a new phase, let's say, the time when two countries can live without war. Then with what idea, with what intention those French media are still bringing the case with Azerbaijan and the necessity, so-called, to protect Armenia. From whom they're going to protect this country. Therefore, from the video which was aired by A News from those flight tracking materials, indeed raise the real question. What is happening in between of two countries, and whether France is delivering the military cargo to Armenia, from the one side demonstrating it's openly the necessity to intensify the cooperation, but from the other side hiding this information from the partnering countries.
Yeah, I mean, we should stress, Anastasia, that clearly there are questions to be answered, but the movement of flights doesn't automatically prove military cargo. So with that in mind, why are these records still drawing such attention, do you think?
Absolutely, that's a very good question. In some media, we already can see the analytics and the presence of the recent visit of Emmanuel Macron to Asian countries, to Japan and South Korea, where he flew in the end of March, in the beginning of April. And during those flights, a specific military cooperation agreement was signed or intensified with both of the mentioned countries. And at the same time, the same, let's say, French military aircraft was detected in the region, traveling from France to Asia and then back. And one more element, what's happened just in May 11, just quite recently, that the same plane also traveled to the Caucasus, positioning itself as a delivery of the lithium batteries or something, let's say, not exactly military cargo, delivering to Georgia. But it's from the official sources was detected. But what is really was delivery to the South Caucasus, and why it was, let's say, coincide with a time when President Macron just recently been in the region, that's a big question. But following the trajectory of the military aircraft, traveling with the same time, following the visit of Emmanuel Macron before to Asia, as I mentioned already, South Korea and Japan, and intensifying military contacts with those countries. And now Emmanuel Macron is coming to Armenia, also signing the strategic partnership agreement covering the military cooperation, and the same military aircraft is being detected in this region. So from this perspective, A News prepared indeed a very interesting analysis highlighting the real intention. Again, you rightly pointed out, probably it's not a military cargo, but analyzing two of these visits of President Macron to the South Caucasus and Asia, we can come up with some ideas that probably it's something the countries in the region have to care about.
Yeah, and clearly there is a connection because we can see the Caesar, the French-made Caesar systems clearly on display in Armenia.
Yes, absolutely. And from the agreement, it's already officially declared that France has to provide, if I'm not mistaken, 36 Caesar artillery systems to Armenia, and some of them already was detected on the streets in Yerevan, and it's supposed to be openly demonstrated on May 28. So we can see that France is trying to increase its presence in the South Caucasus, and there are a number of reasons. As I already mentioned, first, its inability to have any kind of, let's say, other presence, visible presence in other regions of the world. We could see the diminishing positions of France in African continent, specifically as a number of countries stopped any military partnership with France due to its neocolonialism policy in the 21st century. Then indeed the inability of France to have its strong presence in the South Caucasus in partnership with Azerbaijan and Georgia. So Armenia is the only so-called reliable partner for President Macron. And we cannot ignore the fact that the rate of President Macron in his own country is diminishing. Now, if it's around 14 or 16% among the population, and President Macron has to show its own population that France, it still has its strong intention to increase the visibility in other parts of the world. And having its partnership with Armenia, it's an idea to do that. But probably in Paris, they do not really understand that such kind of work can destabilize the region. That the peace what we have today and what is really important, what really matters for the country in the region. For Armenia itself, since the time two countries established, let's say, peaceful coexistence in the region, you can see how two countries are building the economic partnership without the comprehensive peace agreement. The cargo being delivered through Azerbaijan to Armenia, then the fuels also being sent from Azerbaijan to Armenia. And just recently, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan stated that the policy Armenia followed in 1988 and later on had negative consequences for Armenia itself. And he himself openly stated that Karabakh never been internationally recognized as a part of Armenia. It's a part of Azerbaijan. So what we have seen within the last 3 decades, I mean, the occupational policy of Armenia against Azerbaijan has a negative consequences for Armenia itself. So now on the ground, there's a real peace process in between of two countries. And France intervening the region, trying to destabilize the region, trying to possess Azerbaijan as a so-called aggressor and the country Armenia has to be protected from, it gives more floors for those revanchist movement, which is now still acting in Armenia itself and in some European countries, among the Armenian lobby, among the Armenian diaspora. Just recently, so much materials were spread about the campaign Luis Moreno Campo tried to promote in Armenia, and among those revanchist group which is still active in the country. So by doing this, France probably having its own political ambitions, I mean specifically President Macron, but it can have negative consequences for Armenia in case of any mistake or wrong decision made by the policymakers in the country.
Anastasia, always great to hear your analysis and particularly to have you in the studio with us. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, Eurovision caught in a growing political storm as several countries boycott the contest over Israel's participation. Stay with us. A warm welcome back to Primetime. Now, this year's Eurovision Song Contest is facing growing controversy with several countries boycotting the event over Israel's participation. Now, public broadcasters in Spain, Ireland and Slovenia say they will not air the competition, while Iceland and the Netherlands announced last year their refusal to take part. Well, the controversy follows criticism of last year's public vote after reports claimed a campaign linked to Israel encouraged repeated voting for its entry. Organisers have since reduced the voting limit from 20 to 10 in an effort to protect the contest's integrity. Israel's participation remains a divisive issue, particularly after Russia was excluded from Eurovision following its invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Now, Eurovision has long presented itself as a celebration of music beyond politics, but this year politics may be impossible to separate from the stage itself. Well, joining us now is Simon Falk, journalist at the legendary Eurovision YouTube channel Wee Blogs, speaking to us from Vienna. Simon, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us tonight. This year, the competition seems to be more politicised than ever, doesn't it? How serious is this controversy surrounding Israel's participation?
I think I would start to say that Eurovision is at a point where it needs to find out whether or not it can it can pretend not to be apolitical while, everyone knows that it is political. And Eurovision has always been a place where countries could come together for a cultural event despite differences, despite political differences, despite any differences at all. So the big question here is, can Eurovision, still be somewhere where countries will be together no matter of their differences? That's the actual big question now.
And Simon, the mechanics, the financing, the practicalities of this, several broadcasters refusing to air or take part in the contest. Is it becoming a real sort of institutional crisis for Eurovision?
It's on its way to being an institutional crisis, because what happened was that back in December, the EBU members, not Eurovision, but EBU, which we are up at the highest level of each broadcaster, had their General Assembly where there were some new rules introduced to the contest. And it wasn't being said, but it's very clear that it had to be for the reasons that Eurovision, both in 2024 and 2025, had these controversies. So now, again, reducing votes, trying to be more firm on clamping down of, let's say, state interference in campaigning, because campaigning in itself for each country, that's not the problem. The problem is if some countries, governments, go into it and finance it in a way where it skews the actual competition. But the General Assembly, they made those new rules, which meant that the ones who wanted to have a vote about Israel's participation here in 2026, that vote didn't take place, because it was said, okay, now we have made these rule changes, because the rule changes was the first vote, and if they hadn't been introduced, then there might have been a vote about Israel's participation. That never happened.
And critics have been pointing to Russia being excluded in 2022 while Israel remains in the competition. Obviously, that's an imprecise, comparative analysis. But how much is that comparison nevertheless shaping the debate?
That is the question that everyone is asking. And the thing is that nuances, they are lost in all of this. What actually happened, and now we're going into a little bit of detail of why Russia was excluded in 2022. Of course, the trigger for it was the Ukraine war. But what actually happened was that Russia was excluded from Eurovision 2022, not indefinitely. But then all of the Russian state TV broadcasters, they revoked their EBU membership. And to be a part of Eurovision, you have to be an EBU member, which the Israeli public broadcaster Keir still is. So that is the main difference. But of course, when, let's see, regular people who don't follow it as religiously as people like me do, they only see, oh, Russia here doing this, why not Israel, while they do, in their mind, the same thing as Russia did to Ukraine. So I get the comparison, but there are nuances that are lost in this, and those nuances are difficult to get into the general discussion.
Yes.
I'm literally now sitting in the media center at Eurovision. Everyone here knows what it's about, but the general public, they might not know all those details.
Yeah, it's very difficult these days with 24/7 news, social media, to delve into those nuances, isn't it? Eurovision's always reflected Europe's political mood, I guess, to some extent, hasn't it? But do you think the contest has now become too much of an outright political tool?
There needs to be asked questions to each broadcaster and thus each country who wants to participate in Eurovision. Do you want to participate to be a part of the Eurovision spirit? That is, this is a song/show competition. You submit an entry and you compete to whoever likes your entry the most. Or are you in it to say, we want to get sympathy for our country? If it only becomes a sympathy contest, which also slightly happened with Ukraine's victory in 2022, did they win because of sympathy, or was it only a part of it? Did people really like their song? The juries, all of that. So there are always these questions of why do you submit this to Eurovision? What is your strategy going into Eurovision? And it is becoming clearer and clearer. There's always been countries who have instrumentalized Eurovision in some way politically. But I mean, Spain joined Eurovision back when Franco was still dictator. Portugal, the same. They had a military dictatorship. So it's not a new thing. Turkey and Greece couldn't be in the same competitions when they started back in the 70s. I don't have to tell you about Armenia and Azerbaijan. I mean, that's obvious there. But the thing is, I think that the news picture and being updated 24/7, as you mentioned, makes it so much harder to ignore when a broadcaster or a country are trying to instrumentalize the contest in a way where it becomes too obvious. And that's why I think that many people's views of what Israel has been doing for these past 3 years, it's becoming too obvious that it's not only about participating in a song competition. Yes. It has a much broader picture.
Yeah, as you say, there are just too many variables to ever get a perfect situation where everybody can agree that we're completely free of any sort of political bias. And we know that the voting rules were changed after last year's controversy. Do you think the organisers need to do a bit more, though, in the coming years, just to try and reassure people that the trajectory of this great competition is going to continue to be positive and politics-free as far as we can?
The thing is that the current voting system is very easy to, I wouldn't say manipulate because that's the wrong word, but it's easy to make people vote, and not because they are watching the actual show, but just because they can vote. And that's where the whole sympathy comes in, because why do you vote for Eurovision? Are you sitting down, watching the show, looking at all the songs, and then say, okay, now I've seen all the songs, I will decide which songs I'm going to vote for? Or have you made up your mind, before the show, just saying, I don't care how this or this country presents, I'm going to vote for them anyway. That's the neighboring vote debate. I mean, I'm from Denmark myself. The Nordic countries have been accused of being neighbor voting. The same with the Balkan countries. That's a thing, but that's more of a Eurovision spirit thing. It's always been that way. But the problem is, if you, as again, our broadcaster, want to instrumentalize the voting, it's actually very easy, because you can vote from the big show. You can, even if you are in the rest of the world, the countries who are not participating in Eurovision, you can vote of the show, which means you don't even have to watch the show to actually vote. And that's the biggest problem, because who are the people that you want to vote in Eurovision? The ones who are actually watching, or just the ones that gets a targeted campaign and saying, vote for this country? Okay, I will do that. Is that fair? I don't think that. I think that the ones voting in Eurovision should be actual viewers, the actual people who are interested in Eurovision, and not just someone who say, I want to show sympathy for this in this country.
Simon, it's been great speaking to you. We appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Okay, staying in Vienna, and Eurovision for its integral core art. An Azerbaijani cultural event is bringing together music and tradition ahead of the Eurovision Song Contest semi-final. Our presenter Katie Wilson has more.
This might look like Baku right behind me now, but actually we're still in Vienna. We're here at the Azerbaijani Cultural Center for a night of Azerbaijani music and celebrating Azerbaijani culture. Of course, it's all ahead of Eurovision, which is hosted here in the Austrian capital. So tonight is about celebrating Azerbaijani music with a touch of Mozart. Right here at the piano, we heard a piece called Mozart in Baku, a nice little mix of both cultures there. And that's what this evening evening is about celebrating not only Azerbaijani culture, but Azerbaijani diaspora in Austria. Of course, this is all ahead of Jiva's semi-final at Eurovision, which will take place on Thursday. And we've been speaking to her ahead of her performance and about what she thinks of not only this evening, but her chances in Vienna.
I'm so proud that I'm here. So for me, I want to do a good performance, a best performance, and to be in touch everybody's heart, and do my beautiful music. And I'm not thinking about qualified or not qualified.
It's about the music.
Yes, it's about music and performance at this big stage, and this is my time.
Well, for every Azerbaijani, Eurovision Song Contest is something that is very close to our hearts, because we also host the Eurovision Song Contest in Baku before, and it was one of the most successful Eurovision events, concerts, I would say. I was there, I was just 12 years old, but the emotion stays all the way. And this is something unforgettable, and we wanted to be part of this unforgettable event, unforgettable song contest, and to invite our delegation, to invite other delegations here, and to welcome everyone here, as this is part of Azerbaijan, we believe, and we try to show the beauty, the cultural feeling of Azerbaijan.
Participation of Azerbaijan was such a renowned singer, such a beautiful song, is actually a reflection of what Azerbaijan is today. Nation which is proud of its past and looking into a future. And what you, the glimpse of what you have seen today, the performance, is actually representing the best of Azerbaijan's talent, and of course we already can be proud of participation of our singer at the Eurovision Song Contest.
After the break, the fragile ceasefire between Washington and Tehran appears closer to collapse as Donald Trump ramps up pressure and diplomacy stalls. Stay with us. On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Figura orgánica en Argentina. Lo hizo por plata y es para los gobiernos. Un tipo muy piola.
No, money from Armenia from Russia. Group of Russian Armenians. People who are financing this, some rich Armenians, they live in Russia.
Pashinyan lo puso preso. Pashinyan is not protecting the Nikola.
The Armenian game is Russia.
No con Pashinyan mismo, pero.
Que remuevan a Pashinyan.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. One important note to this. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we're reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. The fragile ceasefire between Washington and Tehran is on life support, US President Donald Trump told reporters in the Oval Office, where he flatly rejected the latest peace proposal from Iran as the US ramps up economic pressure on the country.
A new diplomatic crisis is unfolding between the United States and Iran after President Donald Trump warned that efforts to secure a ceasefire are now hanging by a thread. From the Oval Office, Trump delivered some of his strongest remarks yet against Tehran, describing Iran's latest response to Washington's peace proposal as garbage and signaling a return to a maximum pressure campaign.
It's unbelievably weak, I would say. I would call it the weakest right now. After reading that piece of garbage they sent us, I didn't even finish reading it. They said, I'm not going to waste my time reading it. I would say it's one of the weakest right now. It's on life support. They understand these are all medical people. Dr. Oz, life support is not a good thing. Do you agree?
Bad prognostic.
I would say the ceasefire is on massive life support, where the doctor walks in and says, "Sir, your loved one has approximately a 1% chance of living."
Central to the deadlock remains Washington's demand for the total dismantling of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, a point the president insists is non-negotiable for global security.
Very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They can't have it. And if they did have it, the Middle East would be gone, Israel would be gone, and then hit Europe probably next. We're doing the service to the world.
In Tehran, the rhetoric is equally uncompromising. The Iranian Foreign Ministry maintains that its proposals are the only viable path to regional stability, accusing the US of being captive to Israeli interests.
Regrettably, the United States still insists on one-sided views and unreasonable demands, which are largely based on mindsets influenced by Israel.
As diplomacy falters, the US Treasury has announced fresh sanctions against 12 individuals and entities spanning Hong Kong, the UAE and Oman. The move targets the IRGC's shadow fleet used to ship oil to China. Adding fuel to the fire, new reports suggest the conflict has already expanded. Investigative reports claim the UAE secretly struck an Iranian refinery on Levan Island in April, leading to massive Iranian retaliatory strikes on Emirati infrastructure. With tensions affecting maritime routes and US naval forces on alert, attention now turns to President Trump's upcoming meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, where Washington is expected to press Beijing on energy ties with Tehran.
Well, what was supposed to be a path toward de-escalation is now looking increasingly fragile, with both Washington and Tehran hardening their rhetoric and new sanctions adding further tension. Well, joining us now to unpack the latest developments is Gustavo de Aristegui, former diplomat who's joining us from Rabat in Morocco. Ambassador, always good to have you on the show. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure.
This roller coaster, this diplomatic roller coaster then just continues, doesn't it? How serious is this current breakdown in diplomacy between the US and Iran?
We have to understand that what we're actually witnessing right now is a very clear reflection of the very harsh, deep, abysmal, I would say, confrontations between the different sectors of the Iranian regime. Of course, the American government hasn't done its homework properly. The attack, tactical, military plans were probably impeccable, and the result is there to be seen. But unfortunately, the geopolitical and geostrategic planning of Plan B, C, or D, which is always a must, and definitely the day after, has not been foreseen. And this amounts to a big mess. But right now, on the side of the Iranians, you can see that there is a paradox. Once the supreme leader was eliminated on February 28th, there is no other figure in the country that can actually impose to all the factions of the regime any kind of cession or concession that they are willing to make to try to achieve peace. So everybody is trying to show their hardest, harshest face. They don't want to blink before anybody else, and they want to show their own public opinion that they are not weak in front of pressure, and that they are not less orthodox or less fanatical than their peers.
Very interesting indeed. Of course, President Trump described the ceasefire as being on life support, possibly prompted by his medical expert guests in the White House. Is that mainly rhetoric, do you think, or really a sign that talks are genuinely collapsing?
Actually, I don't think they're collapsing. That is my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but I have served in that part of the world for the most part of my adult life, and I don't speak out of readings or news. I have actually been there a zillion times. I served in Iraq, I served in Jordan, and I go to the Gulf every month. What I can tell you, and I speak to people in the place every day, is that Nobody can stand this situation any longer. And the first and foremost victim of this situation is the Iranian economy. Right now, there is no money in the banks. People cannot buy any kind of good. The shelves of supermarkets and shops are empty. And everybody, whatever they're paid, and they're not paid normally, and trust me, that is fact and not opinion, whatever they get paid, if it's a tenth of their salary, a third of their salary, or half of their salary, nobody's getting paid full salary except the Revolutionary Guard. Everything goes under the mattress. Nobody is spending anything. And right now, there is between 2.5 and 3 million jobs that have been obliterated in the Iranian economy. Second, the Gulf cannot withstand this kind of pressure any longer. We're talking about countries that have created an image and an economy that is based on stability, prosperity, and credibility. And all of these three things are very seriously affected by the present situation. And third, and most importantly, if I may say, we are in an electoral year. We have the midterm elections in the United States of America. They are happening in November of this year. If the United States goes into a war that goes into, let's be American, and go into Thanksgiving with hostilities, that is going to be a disaster for the Republican Party. And that is going to be a disaster for the president, because the president, of course, cannot run for re-election, but if there is by any chance any intent of the Democrats to initiate an impeachment process, all of his second part of the term is going to be tangled and completely tied down by the impeachment process. And this is only one of the things that can happen. And they know it very well, so they need to make these conversations be successful in some way or another. I do believe that one of the main objectives that President Trump is taking over to China is to make some kind of concession on commercial deals, even selling Boeing aircraft to different Chinese airlines in exchange for a reduction of tariffs, but above all, for the intervention of the Chinese government, putting pressure on the Iranian regime to accept the conditions and the terms that are being put forward by the negotiators of the USA.
Do you think there's any sense that Tehran are acutely aware that Donald Trump, behind the scenes, is looking desperately for a way out of this, and so as a result are likely to make this as protracted a process as possible? Therefore, we're kind of stuck in a stalemate.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that. That is hitting the nail on the head. I don't doubt that this is probably the greatest paradox of all. The Americans need to get out of this mess very quickly. The Iranians need to get out of this mess very quickly, but the Iranians have a different political system than the Americans. They are an oligarchy. That is a large dictatorship, let's put it in very simple terms. The Americans, no matter what you think of President Trump, if you're in favor or against him, is a democracy. And they are having a very important election in fall. If this thing doesn't get fixed or resolved in any reasonable way, it is going to be a catastrophe for the United States. And I believe that the Iranians are playing this card. But what they do not put into the equation, and that is also absolutely essential to understand, is that the Iranian economy is on the verge of complete and total implosion. Right now, if this crisis lasts more than 2 or 3 weeks, the Iranian economy can take such a severe blow that it would take at least 20 years to recover from it. And let us not forget that the blockade that the Americans have imposed on Iranian ports has already affected the capacity of production of oil, of the Iranian oil industry by at least 300 to maybe 400,000 barrels a day. And this means $20 to $25 billion a year of lost revenue. And that is a complete disaster. The Iranians are trying to compensate that by trying to impose on the Americans and the rest of the world. They're yielding the right of the Iranians to impose toll on the passage, on the safe passage of the Strait of Hormuz. That is not going to happen. Listen, between $100 billion and $200 billion of revenue could result of this toll. That is way larger than the oil revenue that the Iranian regime has today. If the Americans or any other country in the world would allow this, it would, all of this suffering and all of this war would have been for nothing. Furthermore, it would place the Iranians at the upper hand, and it would be complete nonsense and a very serious mistake.
Given the condition of the Iranian economy, as you've just outlined, how central is the nuclear issue still? Is this largely symbolic, or is it materially still a significant element?
Let's go back to the basics. The three elements that the Americans put on the negotiating table on the 27th of February in Geneva are still the same. Stop supporting your terrorist proxies in the region. Stop your mid, long-term, and long-range ballistic missile programs and your hypersonic missile programs. And third, stop enriching uranium beyond 6%. The American side, Witkoff said it in several interviews, they were willing to give the enriched uranium to the Iranian side for free, and they rejected it. So these three things are essential. And let us not forget two essential details. One is that there is at least 1,000 pounds of enriched uranium of over 60%, very near the 90% threshold to produce nuclear weapons, that is hidden somewhere in Iran. And the second is that the Iranians have been enriching uranium beyond that level, and that the International Agency for Atomic Energy, and it's not the Americans or the Israelis, it is the UN specialized body that has said so, have found traces of material that was enriched beyond 83.7%. So right now, when the Iranians are threatening to go to 90%, they are probably very close to that. So we really need to find some kind of solution to get the world out of this mess, because we have bigger fish to fry right now.
Fascinating stuff. Well, we always appreciate your analysis, Ambassador. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Do stay with us.
Figura Armenia que Argentina. Y empieza por plata y es para los gobiernos. Un tipo muy piola.
No, money from Armenia, from Russia. A group of Russian Armenians. People who are financing this, some rich Armenians, they live in Russia.
Pashinyan lo puso. Pashinyan is not protecting Nagorno-Karabakh.
The Armenian game is Russia.
No con Pashinyan mismo, pero.
Que remuevan a Pashinyan.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the centre, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
A warm welcome back to Primetime. Now let's check in with those correspondents around the world, and we start right here in Azerbaijan as the country strengthens its role in regional transit and logistics as the first dry cargo vessel, Gadamli, built in Turkmenistan, arrives at the Baku International Sea Trade Port. Now the new vessel is expected to boost cargo transportation between Baku and Turkmenbashi and support the growing development of the Middle Corridor connecting Asia and Europe. Our correspondent Gulcin Kojalieva has more.
Hello from Port of Baku, where behind me stands the newly arrived dry cargo vessel Gadamli, officially welcomed during a ceremonial reception at the Baku International Sea Trade Port. Built in Turkmenistan, the vessel has completed its maiden voyage across the Caspian Sea and is expected to strengthen cargo transportation links between the ports of Baku and Turkmenbashi. Officials say the vessel will operate regular container transportation services between Baku and Turkmenbashi, supporting the development of the Middle Corridor and wider Eurasian trade routes.
Within the next 3 to 4 months, or by the end of the year at the latest, another new vessel with similar technical capabilities is expected to be commissioned. That vessel will be named Menzil. By the end of the year, Turkmenistan plans to jointly operate 2 cargo ships built at the Balkan Shipbuilding and Repair Yard, the Gadamli vessel we welcomed and the Menzil dry cargo vessel that is expected to be ready by the end of the year.
The Gadamli has a carrying capacity of 6,100 tons and can transport up to 240 standard shipping containers. Port authorities say the vessel is expected to contribute to increasing cargo turnover at the port of Baku as regional transit volumes continue to grow. The welcoming ceremony brought together railway, maritime and port officials, underlying the strategic importance of cooperation between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan in expanding transport connectivity across the Caspian Sea. This is Gulcin Kojalieva with Zohrab Shirinov for A News.
A tanker carrying 45,000 kilolitres of Azerbaijani crude oil has arrived in Japan, marking a historic first for the two nations as the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz continues. Well, the shipment, totalling over 282,000 barrels, is part of Tokyo's urgent strategy to diversify energy sources away from the volatile Middle East. This delivery represents a strategic milestone for Japan, establishing a new energy corridor from Central Asia that bypasses regional choke points. The shipped oil is now headed to ENEOS's Negishi refinery to bolster fuel supplies for Greater Tokyo. China is continuing to strengthen its influence in Central Asia, with Tajikistan emerging as one of Beijing's closest regional partners. Well, during a state visit to China, President Emmanuel Ramon signed a multi-billion-dollar package of agreements aimed at expanding cooperation across key sectors of the economy. Our correspondent reports from the region.
Tajikistan and China are deepening their strategic partnership. During President Emomali Rahmon's state visit to Beijing, the two sides signed more than 50 agreements valued at over $8 billion. The new deals focus on energy, mining, agriculture, logistics, digitalization, artificial intelligence, and green development. The visit comes as China continues to expand its economic footprint in Tajikistan. According to official figures, Chinese investment in the country has now reached nearly $6 billion, including around $3.5 billion in direct investment. Speaking to Chinese business leaders in Beijing, Rahmon described Tajikistan as a reliable investment partner and a key link in future transport and energy corridors connecting China with South Asia and the Middle East. Today, more than 300 state investment projects totaling roughly $13 billion are being implemented across Tajikistan, many involving Chinese companies. And more than 700 firms with Chinese capital are already operating in the country. Analysts say Tajikistan now has some of the closest ties with Beijing in Central Asia, not only in trade and infrastructure, but also in security and long-term political cooperation. President Rahmon's visit is expected to continue through May 14th, with talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping scheduled in the coming days. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
As Georgia pushes to deepen ties with Europe, sharp political tensions are emerging over the country's direction. A visit by Parliament Speaker Shalva Papuashvili to Slovakia has highlighted growing friction between Tbilisi and some of the European Union's leading voices. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili has the details.
Georgian Parliament Speaker Shalva Papuashvili traveled to Bratislava this week for his first official visit to Slovakia, meeting his counterpart Richard Rushi to strengthen bilateral ties. The two sides discussed parliamentary cooperation, trade, energy, tourism, and Georgia's EU integration path. Small but symbolic steps followed, including new direct flights between Kutaisi and Bratislava and Slovak Orthodox Church decision to hold monthly liturgies in the Georgian language. The warm tone in Bratislava, however, could not mask a broader tension playing out back home. Papuashvili used the visit to restate the Georgian government's guiding principles: national sovereignty, traditional family values, and Christian heritage. It is a worldview that sits far more comfortably in Bratislava or Budapest than in Brussels or Berlin. That gap was on full display when German ambassador to Georgia, Peter Fischer, fired back on social media. Responding to Papuashvili accusing him of slander, Fischer posted a pointed lesson. Traveling to one EU member state to attack the ambassador of another is precisely how a country does not join the EU. He reminded his audience that Germany is Slovakia's #1 trading partner, underlining just how tightly EU solidarity is woven together. Papuashvili dismissed Fischer's remarks as impolite and personal, saying the entire Georgian society is waiting for the ambassador to leave the country with only weeks remaining in his posting. The exchange captures Georgia's uncomfortable position, pursuing EU membership while gravitating politically towards the bloc's more nationalist, sovereignty-first corners and clashing openly with the liberal mainstream that still holds the key to accession. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
An important Turkish-Syrian border crossing is reopening to civilian traffic for the first time in more than a decade. The Akçakale crossing, which sits opposite Syria's town of Tel Abyad, will resume passport-based entry and exit procedures as of Tuesday, May the 12th. Here are the details.
One of Turkey's key land crossings into northern Syria will reopen fully to civilian travel on Tuesday for the first time in more than a decade. The Akçakale land border gate, located in Turkey's Şanlıurfa province opposite the Syrian town of Tel Abyad, is set to resume passport-based entry and exit procedures as of Tuesday, May 12th. According to Şanlıurfa provincial officials, the move comes in line with a directive from Turkey's Interior Ministry. The crossing was first closed to traffic in 2014 as the conflict in Syria escalated and the border region became increasingly unstable. Limited operations resumed in 2019, but only for humanitarian aid deliveries, commercial cargo, and authorized public officials. Under the new arrangement, 3 groups will be allowed to use the crossing with a valid passport: Turkish citizens, Syrians with dual citizenship, and Syrian nationals legally residing in Turkey with a valid residence or work permit. The reopening is significant because this part of the border was one of the most sensitive zones during the Syrian conflict, which lasted from 2011 to late 2024. Throughout the course of the war, Tel Abyad changed hands several times, becoming a flashpoint in 2015 when the ISIS terrorist group briefly captured the town. For Turkey, the move is also tied to the wider question of normalization along its border with Syria. Turkey continues to host more than 3 million registered Syrians, many under temporary protection status. So the reopening of the crossing isn't just a technical border decision, but a sign of rapidly shifting conditions in war-torn Syria's northern region. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Tashkent is hosting Uzbekistan Energy Week 2026, bringing together international companies and officials to discuss energy security, green transition, and regional cooperation.
Uzbekistan Energy Week 2026 has opened in Tashkent, uniting major energy companies, government representatives, and experts from 34 countries, including Central Asia and the South Caucasus. The platform combines several key industry events, including the Oil and Gas Uzbekistan exhibition and the Uzbekistan Energy Forum, focused this year on innovation, sustainability, and regional cooperation. More than 580 companies and brands are taking part in the event, making this year's edition the largest in the forum's history. A major focus of discussion is the expansion of renewable energy and modernization of infrastructure. Uzbekistan has already increased the share of green energy in electricity generation to 30%, with plans to raise it to 54% by 2030 through large-scale solar and wind projects. Participants are also discussing digitalization, artificial intelligence in the energy sector, energy storage systems, and regional cooperation aimed at strengthening long-term energy security.
Companies are presenting technologies that allow for deeper processing of hydrocarbon resources, helping reduce production costs while increasing the output of high-value products. The forum highlights investment in innovation. This is particularly important not only for the oil and gas sector, but also for Uzbekistan's wider economy, as the industry remains one of the country's key economic drivers.
Really brings everyone together. We get to meet colleagues, share ideas, share facts, and really hear from the top of the country where they see the country progressing in the next couple of years. And I think that's an essential component in lining up investment, in lining up strategy for different countries. So for me, really that top-down approach, hearing that information direct from the mouths of the leaders of the country allows us to align ourselves and make sure that we can be here to support the country overall.
Uzbekistan Energy Week reflects the country's growing role as an energy and investment hub in Central Asia, while highlighting broader efforts to modernize the sector and accelerate transition towards sustainable energy systems. It is Steven Rajaf reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan A News.
And finally, Afghanistan's Environmental Protection Agency will take part in the World Urban Forum in Baku next week. Officials say the country plans to use the event to highlight Afghanistan's environmental challenges. Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
Afghanistan's Environmental Protection Agency is preparing to take part in the World Urban Forum in Azerbaijan. The preparations were discussed during a meeting here in Kabul between the Director General of the Environmental Protection Agency, Matiullah Khalis, and the head of the UN Habitat in Afghanistan, Stephanie Luz, along with her delegation. According to the official statement, the meeting focused on arrangements for an Afghan delegation led by Matiullah Khalis to travel to Baku for the upcoming World Urban Forum. At the start of the meeting, the Director General welcomed the UN Habitat delegation and described the visit as important for Afghanistan. He asked UN Habitat officials to help make the necessary arrangements for the Afghan delegation's participation and to support strong coordination with relevant international bodies during the forum. The statement says Afghanistan wants to use the conference to highlight its existing environmental challenges. Both sides agreed that the country's priorities should be presented clearly to the international community. Stephanie Luz, the head of the UN Habitat in Afghanistan, thanked the Director General and briefed him on the World Urban Forum and the arrangements for the event in Baku. The World Urban Forum will be held in Baku from 17 to 22 May. It is co-organized by UN Habitat and the government of Azerbaijan. The forum is a major global event on sustainable urban development, focusing on housing, planning, resilience, and climate challenges. For Afghanistan, the participation in the Baku Forum is expected to be an opportunity to raise issues linked to environmental pressure, urban growth, climate vulnerability, and the need for international cooperation. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Well, that brings us to the end of Prime Time. Please do join us tomorrow evening for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here in Baku, thanks for watching.